Welcome to this COCHO webinar on threat trends and vulnerabilities to watch out for. So you've got two presenters today. So myself, Anna Webb, Head of Global Security Operations here at COCHO, responsible for managing the Security Operations Centre and the overall managed security services that we deliver within the company. And today with us, we also have Jack. Jack, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. Yeah, Jack. I mostly work in threat detection engineering. Trying to develop detection capabilities and keep the baddies out.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack. That's great. So some of the talking points that we're going to be touching on today, obviously trends, as that was the title of the webinar. We're going to be looking at trends in the industry and also what we're seeing at COCHO in security operations. Jack is going to take you through some of the trends around phishing and the shift from quantity to quality. Also elements around passwords and tokens and the new face of credential theft, as well as, automating that process. There's some malware delivery methods as well, following up then with the challenges that organizations are seeing and how COCHO are actually addressing those challenges. So the cybersecurity trends over the last 3 to 6 months, some of the things that the industry has been seeing in general, as well as COCHO, they definitely centre very much around that sort of identity theft and social engineering. Certainly phishing, etc., is very much on the rise, and Jack will talk to you a bit more about that later on in his slides. Impersonation and fraud. Huge increase here that we've seen, particularly around sort of people pretending to be people that people from your third-party suppliers, people from other companies, and with some of the phishing tools that we use in COCHO, we've seen an increase in the sort of security awareness training then around being able to identify those fraud and impersonation emails. Ransomware still remains as one of the, the big security trends, although it has continued to plateau somewhat. And obviously nation state actors, they never go away. And with the war in Ukraine and other things that have been going on, like the American elections, we've seen quite a sort of substantial amount of nation state actor activity as well. So from an identity attack perspective, as you can see there, more than 99% of identity attacks are based on passwords. So it's things like breach replay, password spray, and phishing. Those are the sort of typical use cases that we're seeing coming through. And it's also what's been seen in the industry. So this slide here is from the Microsoft security report. So 7,000 password attacks per second. That is an awful lot of password attacks. And then on top of that, you have 39,000 token theft incidents per day. So it's not just a case of the passwords are being compromised, there's also the tokens are being compromised as well. And there's been a huge rise as well of that adversary in the middle phishing attacks. And these are some of the things that Jack's going to talk to you about as well, because we see a lot of these. The token theft and consent from phishing typically happens after post authentication. So it is that sort of fooling you into giving away your MFA token by presenting a URL that actually takes you to a website, fake website typically, but it might look like a genuine credential request from Microsoft or another vendor that you're using. So it very much is sort of, that impersonation and fraud again that we looked at on the first slide. So continuing with the fraud trends and phishing. So unfortunately, there is now a thing called software as a service based email. Where there are things like developer tools, capture services, so those elements that are meant to keep us safe. and cloud storage marketing platforms. Customer survey platforms as well are being targeted, and then lesser known email clients. So it might be that you've only maybe talked to these clients once or twice, but we're seeing threat actors actually weaponizing these tools via email to be able to gain a foothold in your infrastructure and your and get hold of your identities. So the advantage for threat actors, it's that ability to evade detection because there's already established levels of trust with these email contacts or the third party contacts. So that's already established there. And clients are using these services legitimately, which means that they're very unlikely to be blocked. We're seeing actual phishing attempts getting through sort of, they look genuine, they present as genuine, which means that things like Mimecast, etc., will let them through, defenders letting them through, and they're not getting blocked. And whereas we adapt as security people to be able to prevent these phishing attempts to come through, threat actors also continually adapt their tactics. And we see it time and time again where you think a phishing tactic has been deprecated, but ultimately it'll go back around the circle and they'll start using things like attachments, etc. URL links are top of that phishing email types, and you think by now they would have given up on using URL links because people have become immune to them. But unfortunately, people get complacent because they think that these things have stopped happening, and then back around the loop the threat actor goes and somebody gets caught out, and that's how you become compromised. So talking about business email compromise behaviors, if you're looking to sort of be able to detect these, so some of the tactics that the threat actors are actually using is that inbox rule manipulation. So where they manipulate your inbox rules to move certain emails from your inbox straight into another folder, an unsuspecting folder. So they won't actually create a new folder, one that says, please move my compromised email here. They will use existing folders within the structure, things like the archive, things like the conversations folder that you see that comes as standard out of the box with things like Outlook. Attackers are then using that compromise to laterally move across the organization. So they're able to compromise different users to gain access to different accounts. So if if you're logging on and you've got an administrator account, then they're going to gain access to that privileged account, or they're going to trick people into performing actual actions like paying for invoices. Very much seen a lot of trends where an actor will sit and wait. They will have gained access through a compromised token or password. They'll sit and wait in a user's mailbox and look at conversations coming back and forth between maybe somebody from a finance department or from a third party where you're paying invoices, and that's when they pounce. They will start to move those messages that come back into a different mailbox, and then they will insert themselves into the conversation and will actually request for you to pay an invoice. And it's that whole thing of, by the way, the account details have changed. Do you mind paying into a different bank or a different bank account? And if you don't have checks and balances in place in order to be able to mitigate that, that is when that money will actually disappear. I've seen it happen, and it's it is quite scary when it does happen. So the conversation hijacking is that piece where the attacker inserts themselves in the middle of that conversation and uses a similar looking account. So they're impersonating somebody that you're expecting emails through. And then the MFA tampering as well is where they insert an additional device into your MFA setup. So instead of you getting an SMS text maybe with a one-time passcode to your phone, they will have set up an additional mobile phone and it will go to that phone instead of coming to you. So these are the ways that they are sort of using to circumvent the security that's in place. And one of the things that's become very, very obvious over the last 6 months is that identity, that has become the perimeter of most people's network these days. It used to be your firewalls. It used to be those physical devices that sat there protecting you from people coming in. But these days, and yeah, COVID is 5 years behind us this week, but the move to that more remote working, that hybrid working, means that identity has become that perimeter of your network and is very much the thing that is the foundation of everything that we do. And that is why identity-based security attacks are very much on the up. So cultivating a robust security culture within your organization, having that understanding of, you need to keep your identity safe is very, very important. I'm going to hand over to Jack now, and he's going to take a little bit more time to go through the trends that we've been seeing and some of the other things that have come across in SOC. So if I just give you control, Jack.
Thank you, Anna. I wanted to talk about trends that we're seeing directly from our security operations. We'll cover phishing quality over quantity, sort of how traditional mass phishing is declining. I also want to talk about the pressing issue of token theft, how passwords are sort of becoming no longer the primary target, and how legitimate tools are being used to sort of automate that sort of attack life cycle of stealing the token. And then very interestingly, I want to talk about improved social engineering tactics and unusual delivery methods, more so talking about how malware is delivered and the use of fake capture. So if I go on to the first slide. Sorry, I've gone too far. There we go. So traditional phishing emails where mass email campaigns are sort of sent out in a Hail Mary approach are declining. And this is mainly due to like the low success rates and improved security. Typically these get blocked due to new controls and user awareness. So this is why we're seeing a bit of a rise in high quality targeted attacks. Attackers are sort of taking their time, building reconnaissance information, understanding their target a little bit more. With platforms like LinkedIn, there's so much information you can get from LinkedIn alone, and you can quite quickly build up a list of targets and a list of job roles without even sort of doing any hacking or attacking. So that's why we're seeing like a rise of different methods and more targeted attacks that are a little bit more believable. The idea in phishing is to deceive end users, so we've got to keep up with what those tactics are. On a positive note, it is fair to say that user awareness is improving, with phishing awareness and simulation training, and also providing users to report phishing emails is also being helping in security teams stay up to date with potential campaigns going through their organization and things like that. So it's on a positive note, user awareness has improved, but adversary tactics will also evolve. So it's sort of how do we react to those changes, and how do we keep up with those. So yeah, I think we will keep seeing that shift from quantity to quality, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So I like to call this traditional email phishing, and it's now really considered spam. It really relied on spoofing the sender address, when really the email address it was coming from was like a Gmail, Outlook, or sort of those retail email accounts. Now with the email authentication protocols of SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, these gets blocked quite easily, especially if your email protection settings are configured in the sort of correct way. But typically, if one of these email protocols detects a spoofed email being sent from the same domain, it will pick this up and this will get blocked straight away. So the low success rate is being blocked by that factor, and like I said, this is now becoming spam. And also, this is probably the most common phishing email that end users are aware of. And it's quite easy to check, and the methods are quite easy to distinguish whether it's actually coming from inside your organization. There's like certain settings you can do, like tooltips as well, that show that the email is external rather than internal. So combating those sort of traditional spam phishing emails has got a lot easier, which is why we're seeing a bit of a more scary approach where legitimate accounts are being weaponized in these phishing campaigns. So attackers will compromise real cloud accounts with mailboxes. They previously compromised these, and then they can then send phishing emails out from these authorized domains that will typically bypass most email authentications, like your DMARC, your SPF, and DKIM. That's because that mailbox is authorized to send from that domain, so it's sort of bypassing any of those checks. And during our investigations, we commonly find that these accounts are from third parties and suppliers, like Anna mentioned, but sometimes they can be from colleagues as well. If a phishing attack, is widespread and multiple accounts breaches are involved, then you may see that talk of lateral movement through the company and trying to gain access to different accounts, maybe accounts with more authority or more with sensitive access or with IT permissions. So you do see this this internal spread of phishing campaigns quite often. And then as Anna mentioned as well, the tactics that they use to sort of remain dormant and monitoring conversations and building reconnaissance of of what that user's day-to-day is like, or what they get involved in, or what email chains they can be a part of, and sort of monitoring their sort of point of entry to maybe steal money or download and deploy malware or ransomware. And of course, they do make use of mailbox rules. That might be forwarding rules to exfiltrate data, but more commonly we see inbox rules to hide their activity. So if they send, I don't know, three emails to a colleague or a third party to compromise their accounts, they don't want that reply to come into their main inbox. So they'll set a mailbox rule to hide incoming emails from that target into another folder, just so they can see it. And as Anna mentioned previously, they are typical folders that end users don't really go in. So your junk, deleted, RSS feeds is a common one as well. But this is something important to note, because it does highlight how phishing emails can be more believable. They're not just coming from Gmail accounts these days. They will be coming from legitimate domains. And they will try and send more phishing campaigns from that authorized domain account. So then I want to talk on token theft. So passwords are no longer the primary target, and there's a couple of reasons for this. So MFA adoption is now a standard in most environments. I believe Microsoft have implemented the number matching as their default MFA, and you sort of, when you start a new tenant, you have to sort of enable MFA. It's sort of a standard, which is really good, really positive. And the use of password managers together is sort of eliminating that need for weak, easily guessable passwords. So while password attacks are still present and still a lot, they are more automated. So your brute force attempts, they are automated, and any time that there's a password breach, it'll probably be because a user's using a easily guessable password or a common password. But these can easily be combated with password complexity policies. So those two in hand together have worked quite well to combat typical password credential theft. Also zero trust, which is basically the principle of deny by default. So basically just only providing users the minimum access they need on a day-to-day. That sort of helps to keep attacks, isolated where they occur. So due to this, hackers are now targeting tokens. Tokens are primarily used in single sign-on setups, so they are essentially already authenticated, meaning any MFA prompts and checks are already bypassed. So this method completely eliminates the process of capturing a password or MFA information from a user. Tokens can often be valid for hours or days, depending on environment settings. But if they are set like this, it can expand the hacker's attack window. And then obviously you can see in the stats that Anna provided that MFA tampering is a big thing. So often at this point, you may see an extra authentication method be added, maybe a phone or something like that, which just gives them another point of access. If that token does become expired, means they can satisfy MFA and enter in that way. We are seeing that this is a more automated method. Sort of our detections and investigations have sort of observed that legitimate HTTP agents and programs such as Axios are being used for automation. Hackers will use these to essentially intercept and exfiltrate the token, but then they can also use these HTTP agents to replace stolen tokens as well. We've observed this and identified this by looking in sign-in logs. If you have a breach and you look at the sign-in logs and you see a bit of an unusual user agent, sometimes Axios, we've observed Python in there, curl, and there's a couple of others as well. This will indicate that this is the infrastructure that the attackers were using, and it can be automated as well, especially that the replaying the stolen tokens part. They sort of want to use that token as soon as they can to get inside the system. So yeah, they are often replayed automatically, and it's sort of this man in the middle method that the attackers use. They redirect to a legitimate authentication page, but all the data that is entered or all the traffic that is fed through will be going through the attacker's proxy. So that's where they're able to capture that token and replay it to gain access. So what is the end goal? I mean, the end goal can differ from attacker to attacker, and that will depend on their motivations. It really can depend. So I like to think that there's at least three points, at least three teams that attackers may want to go, and the avenue can differ. So the number one, and I think the most obvious one, is finance teams. If hackers want to make a bit of money quite quickly, obviously laying dormant first, but they can intercept finance teams and try and target invoice and payment instructions. These can be manipulated, and we have seen that before, where payment instructions can be changed or redirected in the last minute, which ends up with fund redirectment. And this is quite a common one. It is becoming companies who are victim of this, they put in more checks and balances, which is great, and I think that can help a lot. But we've got to think of situations where a finance manager or an accountant or a finance controller is eventually compromised. If the phishing campaign is so believable, or it's coming from an internal team member that's laterally moving, we will see things like that. And then the other obvious avenue to go to as well would be executives, again talking about those accounts or those identities with authority, and how they can be used for like high impact social engineering attacks. It's similar to the financial controller. The more authority that's with the account, the more likely you're able to, or shall I say, more likely attackers are able to sort of get a payment redirection or payment hijack through successfully and go into their bank accounts. And then the other one to be aware of is maybe going to IT teams or maybe going to, finding access where they can drop malware through, trusted email chains. We talked about attachments and links as well. So if you're sending an attachment internally that downloads malware, chances are it could lead to a full ransomware deployment, which, as everyone may know, has sort of crippling complications and cause disastrous situations for organizations. So they are the three main avenues I think hackers tend to go for. It's either money straight away, or how can we cripple your organization and force money out of you that way. And obviously a part of ransomware can be data exfiltration as well, so there's extortion as well that can come with that, but they're the most common routes. So onto delivery methods. Now this is a really interesting one. So Luma Stealer is probably one of the most known malware families out there, and nothing essentially really changes from the concept of Luma Stealer. Luma Stealer is an information stealer, so it'll be loaded onto computers, and from there it tries to access Google Chrome credentials, or system credentials from Windows. And it basically steals those credentials and probably sends them off to a database automatically to sell on the dark web or to use in their own sort of attack as well. We're seeing a massive increase in this from the industry as a whole. So in the second half of 2024, the detections of Luma Stealer are up over 300%. And for ourselves in the Culture SecOps, we've seen a massive surge in this in Q1 of this year. We're seeing it quite a lot, so it's very interesting as well. But what happens is they are using a fake capture verification deployment method, and I've got some screenshots here that highlight the sort of the interesting point of what the delivery method is. So basically they're making use of fake capture, and the first step seems pretty normal. It's we've all seen this, prove you're not a robot. Typically you click this button, and then maybe you've got 9 pictures and you need to pick the dog out of all the 9 pictures. Well, Luma use a different step after this, so it changes entirely after you click this button, and you get another pop-up that says please hold the Windows button and R, which pops open the run box in Windows, and then it says to press Control V. Now what is happening is very clever. They are automatically copying the malicious payload to the user's clipboard when they access this verification. These verification this verification pop-up typically pops up on advert-filled websites. We're seeing this quite commonly and consistently across websites where, they're filled with ads, and if you click on the wrong thing, something like this can pop up. So they're automatically copying the payload to the user's clipboard. And we've played with this in a sandbox in our own environment, and this is definitely the case. So then the third step is to press Control V, and press Control V in the run box, and it posts a long command in, but the only part the user will see is this snippet here where it says I'm not a robot, capture verification with the ID, because this is pasted at the end of the payload, but then in the start of the payload we can see that it's an encoded PowerShell command. And essentially, once this is run, the user sees nothing because it's all happening in the background, but this is basically making a web request to another website, which is where the malware is being hosted, and then from here the malware is loaded on to the user's machine without any other interaction. It's filelessly, if you like, and from here the interaction with the computer is pretty much the same. Luma interacts with registry keys and it tries to create persistence, and then it also then starts to access Google Chrome credentials or browser credentials, and anything credential based really. We've seen it interact with a whole load of stuff. And I generally think this is all automated as well. So there's nobody sort of on hand at the keyboard monitoring this. It's basically just trying to gain information automatically, with nobody there. So it's quite an interesting social engineering tactic, one that I think is quite new over the last 6 to 12 months, and I think this will continue as well. So then that leads me on to some predictions. My predictions are that I think it's safe to say that end users will remain the number one entry point. I think the room for user error, despite all the awareness training, it's still big enough, and there's enough room forever. This is no reflection on end users at all, but it's more a reflection on how tricky and clever these deceiving methods are that hackers come up with. So yeah, we will continue to see phishing evolving and trying to bypass security. There'll probably be this life cycle as well of old methods coming back in that Anna mentioned. So yeah, we'll see that. And social engineering will adapt. We're already seeing it adapt with the fake capture methods, but I think we'll continue to see this rise, and we will also see more browser-based tricks as well. It's hard to say what they might be, but it's interesting, and this fake capture has quite a high success rate. So I think we may see more from the browser going forward. And this is one that I think is quite known, but I think attackers will play the long game. In most successful attacks from all around the world, in every industry, attackers lay dormant. They tend to stay undetected, and they basically try and find the best time to strike. I think it's about learning the business, learning what that user's responsible for, and who they interact with, and who they can deceive internally to hijack those payments or gain access to other accounts. And on that, I think the targeted attacks will take over entirely, and I think it already has. So the spray and pray type of stuff will still exist, but it will be all automated, and the low success rate stuff will stay, but it will never reach the same success rate as targeted attacks will. And then next slide, I think this is back to you, Anna.
Yeah, it is. If you can hand control back, that'll be great. Thanks. Cool. So thanks, Jack, for that information. Yeah, there's quite a lot to take in there, and obviously, these are the challenges that are facing organisations today. From a threat landscape perspective, attacks are becoming more sophisticated and harder to detect. Sorry, and it is because the attackers are using the systems that are available. They're sort of obfuscating who they are by using legitimate email addresses, and actually posing as people that might work at the desk next to you, or might be somebody that you interact with on a regular basis. So having that proactive threat intelligence to understand what's going on, understanding who the new threat actors are, what their sort of activity looks like, what their indicators of compromise might be, is very, very important. And then if you bring into that compliance and regulation, something else that's always evolving, the security frameworks that companies are now having to adhere to. We see them quite a lot when we're looking at proposals for clients who are looking to take our service. There's things that we have to adhere to as well for third party relationships, things from NIST, ISO, obviously GDPR, and that's changed with Brexit as well. And sometimes just one ISO is not enough. You've got the 27001, but then people want the 20,000, which is around the ITIL based framework, 9001, which is obviously the quality management system framework as well. And maintaining compliance is very, very difficult, because it is a continuous process. It's not a one-stop element where you just do it, forget about it for a 12-month and then come back round, fix everything before the audit and then leave it where it is. It's, you know, I liken compliance, particularly things like Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, to an MOT. You know, you have some people who take their car to the garage and it sort of scrapes through the MOT, you fix the few pieces, that might be a tyre change or a bulb that's out, and then they don't do anything with it for another 12 months until the MOT comes back round. Whereas you have other people who take their car maintenance quite seriously, they check on these things on a regular basis, and really speaking, you want to be able to get to that MOT at the end of the next 12 months and go, apart from anything like majorly glaring, like, you know, maybe a bush has gone, but you should know that that's happened, then you should pass that MOT quite smoothly. And the same should be said when it comes to audits from a security, governance and compliance perspective. Skills gap in the market, there's still this, you know, 35 thousand sort of skill shortage was the sort of number that was bandied about a while back. There is still a shortage of cybersecurity talent, which makes it difficult for companies to recruit, makes it difficult for companies like us to recruit, even though, you know, we do have very good recruitment strategies. And then you also have sort of shifts in the market as well, which means that maybe security staff are not moving as much between jobs. So being able to automate and use AI, etc., for your managed services to augment that base layer, that triage element, the sort of initial bit, is really, really important. And then visibility and response, detecting those threats in real time, you know, as they happen, is very much a challenge. We've talked a lot about phishing. We've talked about the inbox rule manipulation. Sometimes that is the first time that companies know that something has happened, is when they realize that their sort of conversations in their inbox are being moved. Doesn't always, you know, doesn't always give you the visibility that you need, really. What you want to know is when they've actually stolen that token, or when they've actually, you know, somebody's actually clicked on that URL before they even get to the point that they've put their credentials in. And organizations do struggle with efficient incident response. It's like knowing what to do, knowing who to engage. Stakeholder management when it comes to incident response is very, very important. So looking at some of the things that Coach SecOps are doing to address these challenges, the service we provide is very much built on proactivity and collaboration. We want to work with our clients to understand them from the ground up. We talked about identity earlier on, and having those insights into the users within your company makes it much easier for us to do a proactive role when it comes to incident response. If we know who your finance team are, if we know who your sort of critical users are, then we can make, you know, rules, etc., and automation based around those accounts, watch lists and things like that. And it's encouraging that security first mindset. We very much advocate for a base element of like Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. You know, it's strengthening your compliance posture by maintaining those really sort of straightforward elements of security, you know, not having local admins everywhere, not having everybody having administrator accounts or global admins or whatever just because that's what they want to do, you know, and it's understanding compliance for you as a client, not just blanket sort of apply the same to everyone. We do look to bridge the skills gap around relevant training, not just Microsoft. You know, it does have to be training in incident response, training in being able to understand how pen tests work, red teaming, that sort of thing, and supporting external efforts as well. So we do a lot of work around working with local universities and school to encourage the next generation through. And then improving visibility and incident response, you know, enhancing those detections using the SIEM tools and the XDR solution, streamlining response using the automation playbooks, those sort of things, and then building comprehensive and relevant threat intelligence, which is exactly what you need to be able to combat a lot of this. So the next steps, if you're interested, COCHO offers a security posture assessment. It goes a long way to identifying those risks that might be in your organization, and it gives you those priorities when it comes to improving your security. Very much is an in-depth analysis of your environment, a validation of your security, and it's a communication and visual element around your security risks that you can provide to your C-suite or to your board, which sometimes when you're trying to get that higher level to really invest in security, it's that visual piece that you need. So get in touch if you are interested in something along those lines. And now we have a little bit of time for some questions. There are actually two in the Q&A panel. So the first one has been, have you seen bad actors use Microsoft's tools such as Power Automate to move emails? Jack, I'm going to pass this one over to you. Have you actually seen Power Automate being used as a means to move emails?
In short, no, we haven't seen Power Automate, but I think it's a great question because MS tools and other tools available to users through the App Store, we do see commonly abused as well. So in short, no, but I'd like to highlight as well that we see attackers consent to new applications once they've gained access. Using third-party email clients as well, that can sometimes hide their activities even further. So I think it's a great point. Definitely something to keep an eye out for as well. But it's also about analyzing abnormalities in users' behavior. If they don't use Power Automate before and that user account stops using Power Automate, then that's a detection capability that can hopefully pick up on activity like that. Similarly with certain app consents, it should be configured that users shouldn't be able to consent to any app on the App Store, but also making use of detections to look at new app consents as well for certain users is a great idea.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jack. And then the other one that we have is, how difficult is it to perform lateral movement within the network through phishing attacks?
So it depends on the environment, and it depends what access the hackers can get. So if the attackers have simply got mailbox access to a cloud account, then they would either need to get to another account that's got, I don't know, VDI access or VPN access to a remote desktop or something like that, or then it's about trying to drop malware onto another machine or that victim's machine. Try and get access to via remote shells and get command line access to run commands further that way. Again, it depends on the environment, but if the attacker ends up being inside a on-premise environment, then typically lateral movement operations are quite simple to do. There's a lot of stuff out there that can help, Kerber roasting and targeting service principles and things like that. But that's where your endpoint detection and response needs to come in, and ensuring that you've got endpoint monitoring on every endpoint and every server possible, because typically things like Kerber roasting and Mimikatz and all these sorts of pen testing tools will be picked up. At least maybe if they're not picked up directly, they'll be picked up indirectly as well by the EDR. So I think it depends, but it can be straightforward. Obviously, if you're a cloud only environment, then it'd be a little bit difficult. But it all depends on what accounts you've got access to and who you can get access to going forward.
Thanks, Jack. That's great. There's no other further questions, but if anybody does have any questions, then please feel free to reach out. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for listening and participating. Hope it's been a worthwhile webinar, and we will see you soon on the next one. Thanks very much.